So today we're going to talk about the 2003 film by Kiyoshi Kurosawa called Doppelganger. And I found this film on the streaming site Canopy that I get through my local library. I was looking up any Kiyoshi Kurosawa film I could find. After watching Cure and Pulse, I was addicted already. So far, I've seen in the past, I want to say 3 months since I started watching him, I watched Cure, and then I watched Pulse, then I watched Retribution, then I watched The Wife of a Spy, and now I have seen Doppelganger. So I'm getting through some of his filmography. He has so many movies, and I can't wait to watch so many of them. I think I'm going to watch Creepy next. Very excited for that one. I do want to watch Seance, and I want to watch Charisma shortly. And if I can find To the Ends of the Earth on anything, I really do want to watch that one as well. But alas, today we're going to talk about Doppelganger. And it's a premise that I really do like. The kind of film kid thing where it's like you think you have an original idea. I totally have had doppelganger ideas before, and I was looking through just like lists of different doppelganger movies, and there's more than I thought. But I like this one a lot. What's another one? Oh, I really do want to watch Duel by Riley Stearns. That just came out recently. Another kind of doppelganger movie because it's like they make the second person. It's about they make a double because one of them is terminally ill, and then she magically gets better, and then they have to duel to the death because only one of them can survive. That's what I got from like the log line and from just roughly talking about it with other people. But it seems pretty fun. But last, we're here to talk about Doppelganger. This film is not the most well known. It has 2.1K on Letterboxd, which is not that much. And if I go to like the Wikipedia or if I go to like IMDb trying to find like box office numbers or things like that, it really does not have the most. Like, this is a very crude plot, almost feels like a log line worth of a plot, doesn't give you exactly plot details. A bit of the reception here, just by a few reviews like AllMovie, IGN, and just, what is this one here? Many similarities to his other film, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so there really isn't too many sources or information on Doppelganger on the internet. I could only find like maybe one or two videos on YouTube that were actually talking about this film. But I thought it was very, very interesting. I feel like every time I watch a Kiyoshi Kurosawa film, I get something out of it, even if it was a little more underwhelming. Like, I watched Cure first, and that's honestly one of my favorite movies now, and I don't think any of his films are going to live up to that potential. But even this one, I gave it 3.5 stars, but at the end, it just left me thinking because his endings are just really, really good at tying into the themes of the film. And he always has strong themes. And like with Wife of a Spy as well, I feel like the first half, I definitely felt like it was dragging a bit and there wasn't anything really terribly special. But then with her transformation at the end of Wife of a Spy, that one really reshaped the way I thought it. Even though I think it definitely is not at the level of Pulse or Cure. Similar level of enjoyment, I feel like, to Doppelganger, where there are some weird plot lines that just go on, and it's definitely less of his horror type of stuff, but in the end, I definitely did still get a lot out of Doppelganger, based on the ending, which I'll talk about at the end. Who would have thought? But from now on, I will start to get into some spoilers. I'll get into the plot and just kind of my thoughts on how it all ties together. But it was a very interesting one to think about after the fact. So we have... Okay. I didn't know where I want to start. I didn't know if I want to start with the chronological start, if I want to start with the protagonist, who is played by Koji Yakusho, who is Kurosawa mainstay. But I'll start with it chronologically. So the first character that is introduced is Yuka, I believe, and her brother. She sees her brother at the supermarket, and she's like, "Oh, do you want me to give you a ride home?" And he just stays quiet for some reason. So she goes home, and when she gets home, he's already there, and she's like, "What? That was quick. Were you not just at the supermarket?" And he's like, "What? What are you talking about?" And then she gets a call, and the call says that, is this whoever's sister? Yeah, your brother just died. And she just saw him in the house, and before that saw him at the supermarket. So, of course, knowing the name of the film, you're obviously going to make the connection that he was a doppelganger. But it's a very good setup. I think that is the most like horror aspects, kind of classic Kiyoshi Kurosawa feeling that you get right at the beginning of the movie. Because this movie definitely evolves from that more horror Kiyoshi Kurosawa, very suspenseful aspects. Because right at the beginning with the great setup, and then it moves more into a more silly kind of slapstick. What's the word I want to use? I want to use the word like unchained, unhinged, because it kind of, the movie is about people's psyche and kind of, if we're thinking about it in Freud terms, the id and how that can be unhinged. Okay, I think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself talking about all the themes and everything, but yeah, so she gets a call and it says her brother is dead, even though that she just saw him. After this, we cut to Hayasaki, played by Koji Yakusho, and he is a very arrogant scientist, and he's developing this robotic chair in this lab for this company, and he's been at this company for a long time. He's kind of like their prize scientist. He's a genius. He has made so many inventions for the company, everything, and he works with these two other people, his partner Akoi, and I just wrote down the names here, Takano. And so he works with them, and everyone at the company is kind of like pushing him to pushing him to reveal this project to like a board of directors. But there's just this one small flaw to it, and he's like, okay, it's not perfect. We have to make this perfect. And he like gets really mad. He's very like passive aggressive, or no, it's not passive aggressive. He's pretty aggressive. He's not the nicest guy, but hey, he's a genius. He's passionate for his work. And so, yeah, they want to show it to like this board, and he feels like there's still things that need to be made. They eventually do show it, and it has this demonstration of him like cracking an egg with the robotic chair that is controlled by the mind. So it's a guy sitting in the chair, and he uses his mind to control the robotic arms and crack an egg. And then everybody just goes crazy and starts clapping. And after that meeting, Koji's character, Hayasaki, he leaves and he's like, oh, that was embarrassing, them clapping that much and everything. It was just embarrassing. And it's like, you can tell from the very get-go that he is very, what's the word I want to use? He is very arrogant and driven to perfection, that he feels like he's smarter than everybody. And people who are just kind of giving him gratitude and constantly telling him, oh, he's a genius for everything that he's doing, it feels to him as if they're just like more stupid people just giving him this praise, and it's embarrassing him. So there's just a lot of complexity that's set up with his character. He does come across kind of as just of an asshole sometimes, but hey, whatever. So after all of that, there is a scene where Takano, one of his partner at the lab, and she tells him that one of her friends, I believe, it might have been like a relative or a friend, I'll just say friend, one of her friend's brothers died recently, but her friend keeps talking about how he had a doppelganger, and that he died because he came into contact with his doppelganger. So there's a bit of setup there, given that we know that Hayasaki's the main character, and he's probably going to get a doppelganger at some point. I mean, you can see it in the poster, probably if you've seen a trailer. The trailer, crazy, kind of feels like a James Bond, Pierce Brosnan era, with these titles flashing by and this intense music. Very weird vibe for a Kiyoshi Kurosawa movie, but I guess that's kind of what happens with his movies. They have to get marketed in a certain way, and this one, I guess, more of a thriller. Some of his other ones, they get marketed more as like pure horror rather than what they are, than like suspense, psychological horrors. But okay, so after all that happens, at one point he goes home and he sees a person, and then that person enters his house, and it is his doppelganger. And he begins to look away, right? He tries to tell himself that it's not real, that it's all in his mind and everything, but then the doppelganger just keeps like laughing at him and everything. So there we go. He has a doppelganger. Woo! We all knew that was going to happen. So in the framing, when there is both of them in the same scene, I have a weird thoughts about it, because They are very, very clearly trying to hide that both of them are in this scene by using a body double, by framing it. Even one time we're in the car, they had a shot where it's like they have. What's the best way to demonstrate this? They had a shot of one of them driving here, and then they cut to the other one who's driving here. And it's like the other person isn't in the shot. And it's, yeah, he very clearly is masking it. But given that, I also do want to give props for the stylistic choices of having the segmented frames, segmented screen when you have 3 different portions of the screen that break apart and they show the same actions happening from different camera angles. And it's just a good visual representation of the themes of Doppelganger and everything. And I think it works well for this movie. It could come across as cheesy for some other movies, but I think with the kind of weird, surreal style that he's going for, I do think it worked very well, and it was very easy to keep track, and I do think it definitely added to the story in the moments that it was there, and yeah, I did dig it, but there were still, like, many times where they were just trying to hide that it was 2 of them. But good for them for not really, like, trying to hide the fact that they were trying to mask it. Okay, moving on. So, his own doppelganger is more arrogant, more speaking his mind, just saying what's on his mind, more instinctual, and more of an asshole. So the main guy, he starts to befriend Yuka and ask her about his brother, kind of like subliminally being like, hey, tell me about this guy who said he has a doppelganger. No reason, really. Well, it's just him trying to adapt to his doppelganger. There's a bunch of scenes that are really good. I like when they go to the shop and they, like, sit behind each other, and then the doppelganger comes in and he's like, hey, I'll have the same thing. I'll have what he's having because we're the same guy, huh? Crazy. And so they talk about that and everything. And then so the doppelganger is, even though he's arrogant, he does help support the main guy. He eventually gets to a point where he steals some money to help him get his own funding for finishing the chair. He breaks in to the lab that he works at, and he breaks everything. We can see it in this frame right here on the letterbox banner. He just completely destroys the lab. Then they go back, both of them in the car. They take the machine back, and when the girl's there, the doppelganger's getting her help for everything and kind of hitting on her and being an asshole. And so we're starting to see that we know that the main guy has a lot of pressures from his business and not doing things that he wants to do. And we're starting to see that this doppelganger is living out some of the things that he wishes he could do. If we're looking at this in Freud terms, he's the id who's going on his impulses and being more chaotic. If we look at, like, the chaotic chart, you could map out the doppelgangers. Maybe they should make a doppelganger movie where it's like 4 different doppelgangers. You have the chaotic good, chaotic evil. What is it? What else is it? What's the opposite of chaotic? Chaotic good, chaotic evil, neutral. What's the other one? I don't remember. I'm going crazy. Okay, so they steal the machine. They get a new warehouse. Yuka comes along and she helps out with his new warehouse. And then they also hire a guy named Kimishima, who is his new partner. His old partner, we'll get back to him, Takano, still really wants to be involved with him because he's like, hey man, I've been here a long time, I should maybe, like, get a cut of everything. And it's like, hey man, I'm here for you, I can get your funding. And then he's just like, no, I got my funding, because his doppelganger just stole everything. And so as they start to do this, there's this, it starts to get a little bonkers. So Yuka, his new friend, she tells him that her brother is still in the house. The doppelganger is still in the house. And all he's doing is writing a novel. And he wants to, like, move to America or something. And she still feels haunted by him. That he's just living in this house, always in his room, just writing. And it very much feels like the way they frame it feels like it could be a ghost. And the line between, is this a real doppelganger, a real phenomenon that's happening in the narrative, or if it's just in everybody's heads. But I like to think of it as both because it definitely has strong thematic relevance. And it's just, sometimes people get annoyed when they cop out and be like, oh, it was in their mind, actually. So, And I like that about this movie. I like that it doesn't give clear answers as to if it was happening or if it's in people's minds. But definitely the way they frame that brother for Yuka is that he's haunting the place that she lives. And so the doppelganger kills him and tells her, oh yeah, he moved to America. He's not coming back. But he just kills him. So yeah, that's cool. So as they are hanging out in this new warehouse and, working away on this machine, testing it out, Yuka tested out at some point, and then I think Kimishima tested at some point, and they're like, oh, Kimishima, you're a genius. Yeah, you're great. And so the doppelganger, so the doppelganger was the one who, hired Kimishima, and then the main guy was like, okay, you know what? I'm hiring you, so instead of working for the doppelganger, you're working for me as my new partner, and don't talk to the doppelganger anymore. You're with me now. And then the doppelganger comes into the warehouse, confronts them, and then everything starts to go crazy. Because there's these weird moments where it's like, we don't know who's who. So the doppelganger's in there, and he's kind of hitting on Yuka and harassing her and assaulting her. And then the main guy comes back, and then it starts to just get into the crazy finale. So this last 45 minutes is such a huge tonal shift. I think at the very beginning, you have some of the horror elements. Then in the middle, it's more of the drama, doppelganger, cool concepts, living life and seeing how the doppelganger is affecting your life. And then the last 45 minutes gets more into slapstick. It is some violent things that happen as well. Okay, so I would say the beginning of the finale is when they get into a fight, the main guy and the doppelganger, and then the doppelganger is killed. They kill him, and they're like, oh man, that's crazy. He just hits him so many times with, I forget exactly what he was killing him with. I think it was just a metal rod or something, and they just smashing his face in on the ground. Okay, so they shove his body somewhere, they bury it, and then they're like, okay, we are going to drive this robot away. And so as they leave in the car, they get out. I forget why they get out. I think it's it's too heavy. Right. It's too heavy. At one point when they're driving, who is it? His old partner, Aoki, is on the street and he's like, hey, guys, I will give you $200,000 and give me the machine. Because we're partners, you got to give me a piece of it, I'll just give you a bunch of money and we'll say it's mine. I'll win some Nobel Prize. Oh yeah, they were on their way to sell it to that competing technology company. And then when they get there, they just they get there and then they leave. They meme on everybody. They hit this one guy down and then they drive it away. And so I think that definitely leads into a lot of their true desires, where it's they kind of just want to shove it in the other tech company's face and then leave and be like, yeah, this is my invention, sorry. Okay, so as they're going on this road trip adventure, they go do that, and then after that, they meet up with Aoki, who's like, hey, I'll buy your stuff. And they're like, nah, okay, we're good. After that, the thing is too heavy in the car. And so car breaks down, and they're going around this river and everything. Kimishima is standing on the side of the waterfall thing. He's like, whoa, this is so cool. And then the main guy is like, yeah, it is cool, isn't it? And he pushes him off. And he's like, yeah, we don't need you anymore. I know that you want to kind of take credit for everything. You've been stating that. And then he pushes him off. And I feel like that was those two events that happened, them leaving the other tech company and him pushing him off the waterfall, are the hints that's okay, maybe the wrong person died. Maybe the doppelganger's still alive. And I really, really like that ambiguity. And so, yeah, we have this whole just wacky ending car chase where the geography just doesn't make any sense. So you have them pushing Kimishima off the waterfall, um, and then Kimishima comes back and he hijacks their car. And is it him? Yeah, he has a gun. No, he doesn't have a gun yet. But he finds Aoki after hijacking the car. And then Aoki has a gun, but he walks up to him and he just hits him with this pole, takes the gun, takes the money from Aoki, who's like, I'll just buy it off you. So now he has the car, the machine, and the money, and a gun, and he's driving away. And then the other two, the main guy and Yuka. Okay, I'm explaining this very horribly, and I'm assuming that people have seen this. Okay. Okay, so let me restart this finale. Set the stage. They just left that other tech company after being like, hey, you want to buy it? Jokes? Okay, we're leaving. This is Hayasaki, Yuka, and Kimishima. Kimishima gets pushed off a waterfall. Then he comes back, hijacks the car. So now it's just him. The other two, Hayasaki and Yuka, are just trying to run through this field and get back somehow. Kimishima meets up with Aoki, who's like, hey, I'll just buy it off you. And then they both go back to the cars. They both come back and they have weapons. Kimishima just decks him with this metal rod. Takes the money, takes the gun, takes the car and the machine. Now he has everything. Aoki meets up again with Hayasaki and Yuka, who have a car somehow. And they're like, oh man, that's crazy. This is a crazy day. Sorry guys, didn't mean to be weird back there. And so they're driving. And now I'm even getting confused. So they're all together. I think he leaves at some point. Who's he? Aoki. And then as he's walking across a street, Kimishima is barreling down the road and just absolutely decks him. It's in the trailer. It's crazy. He just runs him over. I think that was Aoki. I'm getting all these characters mixed up and the order of the plots because this plot at the end is just supposed to make no geographical sense. Some people get left behind. And then, Kimishima's driving away. But then they meet up with him, minutes later. And just, the speed of the car and the speed of people on foot doesn't make any sense. They're all just in this labyrinth, meeting up and finding the car and finding the machine, robbing each other over and over. And then we get to Kimishima goes in this abandoned house and he has a gun. And then Hayasaki and Yuka follow him in there. He has a gun. And so they go in there. Kimishima starts to shoot at everything, trying to kill them. There's this scene where this Indiana Jones boulder just comes barreling downstairs. I think that moment was like, okay, this is, before that, I was like, okay, does he just not understand geography and time and anything? But then you have the boulder, and it just becomes so much more clear that this section of the movie is supposed to be more slapstick, more nonsensical, more surreal in the way that things just don't make sense, more dreamlike. So after all this, they get the car back. And so Hayasaki and Yuka, they have the car, they have the machine. They're living large. They go to the side of a cliff near the ocean. And they take out the machine and they just let it do its thing. And without anybody in the chair, the machine just starts, his arms just go crazy and it just starts driving itself off of the cliff. And then they leave. They're holding hands and they walk into the horizon. And it's just such a weird tonal shift. It really is. And as I finished it, I was thinking to myself, the ambiguity and the weird, surreal, dreamlike stuff at the end, I really dug because it plays along the themes of the Doppelganger, where we got this story about this guy who had a doppelganger. But in the end, my mind is thinking, this everybody in this final finale has become a doppelganger. Their doppelgangers has bested their normal selves. And now everyone is just following their innate desires and impulses. And if we think of that on a more broad scale, along the whole world, this movie gets a lot more crazy and kind of more along horror, just like psychologically. Imagine if every single person in the world meets their doppelganger, who embodies their their impulses. If we're talking about Freud, the id, just their desires, the things that they're too afraid to do. Because we have the main guy who's too afraid to like stick it to his bosses, too afraid to get with a girl, and then his doppelganger comes and does all those things. You have his old partner Aoki, who is his loyal partner and who is his funder, and then eventually he turns to trying to use money to just buy the entire machine and get credit for it. Same with Kimishima, trying to do the same thing. And so if we're thinking about it worldwide, if everybody in the world, we're seeing this one isolated story, that would be so cool if at the end of this movie it was like everybody in the world has now been taken over by their doppelgangers who are not afraid to do the things that they actually want to do. It's just a cool ending. It's kind of like at the end of Pulse, where the world just kind of gets absolutely destroyed because everyone's just getting ghosted. It feels like a smaller version of that. And I think thinking about it that way made me like the movie more. Even though it's not strictly in the narrative, I really like the implications of the ending. And also the robot at the very end is interesting because it's like the robot has always had somebody controlling it, but then in the very end, it drives itself off a cliff while its arms are just going crazy and everything. So I think, yeah, the robot as well is representing this primal desires, letting loose. Not only primal desires, but it's kind of encapsulating the themes of if everybody was following these desires, that they would be unhinged. They would be going haywire. Because there's a reason why we reel it in, as in the id, the ego, and the superego. And I was trying to think of it in the way that, like, oh, maybe it's like the robot's the third part of the id, ego, and superego. And it could be like, the main guy is the superego, the doppelganger is the ego, and then the robot is the id, who's just going crazy. Which kind of makes sense, but the id is always kind of represented as the unhinged devil, and I feel like the doppelganger itself kind of just embodied that a lot as well. But it's still just an interesting way of thinking about it. And then the last thing about this kind of thinking is I really, really came to appreciate the structure of the movie becoming more unhinged as well. And I think while watching the movie, it's definitely a movie that is better upon thinking of it rather than watching it. And it's weird because I feel like if I were to watch it again, yes, some of the moments, some of the maybe just like the side stuff in the middle, some of the wacky, weird, dreamlike slapstick stuff at the end might not hit while I'm watching it. But I really liked thinking about it at the end because the movie progresses in this narrative where it's like we're watching this guy who is very reserved and has his life that he's living, and then it completely gets derailed when this doppelganger shows up, as does the narrative, as does the film itself. It goes crazy with the surreal stuff at the very end. And thinking about it, yeah, it's just very cool to see how the structure of the film represents the main theme of the film, which is cool. And yeah, just like it says here on the letterbox thing, what if your worst nightmare turned out to be you? Kind of thinking about how people are afraid of these desires that they have, that people at the end of the day reserve themselves, but on the inside are all just kind of crazy, which is cool. I really dig it. And it's one of those movies where it's like I haven't gone back and rewatched it or anything, but I'm interested to see, like, if you go back and rewatch it, if you could like spot out where you think each character is actually there. So if we think about it under the lens of everybody in the film has a doppelganger, because the way I thought about it is like at the end of the film, in that finale, all four of those characters involved, they're all the doppelgangers at that point. It would be interesting to rewatch it and kind of pinpoint where you think in the scenes it shifted from the main person to the doppelganger. Because I think that way of thinking of it makes the movie a lot more entertaining and a puzzle piece that needs to be put together. And it just makes it more cohesive and everything. And yeah, thinking about it after was more fun than watching it. Weirdly. But that's what I said about, like, at the beginning of the stream, where I was saying how Kiyoshi Kurosawa films leave me after the fact with so much. Every film that I've seen of him, I really, really loved the ending and like the feeling that it left afterwards. So yeah, that's I think that's all I really want to say about Doppelganger. I just so intrigued by it, and I just love Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Yeah, like I said before, I'm gonna watch Creepy very, very soon, and I'm very excited to watch some of his other stuff. I think I do really like the horror stuff a bit the most, like Kieran Pulse, of course, top tier. Interested in Tokyo Sonata still, though, because yeah, that is definitely just a more of a drama. I'm pretty sure it's a bit comedy from what I've read a bit, but man, I love this guy, Kiyoshi Kurosawa. He's the best. So next week, I was thinking we could do Duel by Riley Stearns. There's a couple other things that I wanted to try as well. So I think maybe I'll hold off on Duel and not have a doppelganger theme 2 weeks in a row. And I think I will go with Mystic River. Clint Eastwood. I actually just purchased it on DVD. I went to a used CD, vinyl, DVD, Blu-ray store called The Beat Goes On. And I just purchased Mystic River by Clint Eastwood. And yeah, a lot of Academy Awards. I believe it was Sean Penn and Tim Robbins both won Academy Awards for it. And yeah, I just really dig this type of like murder mystery, civilians go unhinged. Kind of makes me feel like a Gone Baby Gone meets a Gone Girl, kind of stuff like that. Yeah, I think everyone understands the vibe of Mystic River, and I'm sure many people have seen it, but I do like most of Clint's stuff. Some of his new stuff, not the greatest. Cry Macho, kind of horrible. But yeah, next week, Mystic River, and next week is the 18th, so Monday, July 18th. We'll talk about Mystic River, and yeah, I'm gonna use my my new DVD that I just got. It was $2. I was like, oh, of course. Can't really find this movie on many other platforms, so hey, I will buy it for $2. So yeah, looking forward to it next week.